All right, so there was a post on Reddit talking about the 8-rack matchup, saying that it was like a really hard matchup, and it can be, but depending on how well you play it, I think. And it took me a while to figure out the correct way to play against 8-rack as well. So this game, I think, is a pretty good example of the correct way to play against 8-rack. Anyways, the opponent put me on the play, so I figured, okay, they're probably on 8-rack. So I figured they were on 8-rack, but I didn't want to do one of those things where, I use that information. I wanted to try to play fair, where you're supposed to say if you're going to play or draw before you draw your hand. So, and before you decide if you're going to keep. So, since they already told me, I was like, well, yeah, I might as well keep. I was going to keep this anyways because of the Academy Ruins and the 2 Shredders and the Stirrings. So, and play the Shredder. Yep. And so them playing Urborg into Inquisition confirmed it for me. Like, absolutely, yeah, they're on 8-rack. So they grabbed my Stirrings, which makes sense, because then I can't grab Lantern. So here, now, I didn't know my opponent's hand, the rest of the hand. So I have 3 lands in hand. And you'll notice here that I just draw, and I play the Needle. I'm happy I do that Needle, because one of their best threats against us is, so the plan here is I just hold lands in my hand, because cards like Inquisition can't get lands. Cards like Thoughtseize can't grab lands. It's very difficult for them to discard lands. There's only a few cards in their deck that can do it. Sometimes Funeral Charm, Liliana the Veil, and the ultimate is super dangerous for us, and Raven's Crime. And Wrench Mind to a degree as well. And sometimes Smallpox if they draw that. So I want to name Liliana immediately. And I do. I don't blind mill my opponent, because I do not want to put a Raven's Crime in their graveyard. So they get the only other non-land card out of my hand. Notice I did not play a land on turn 2, because I knew that, they want to discard cards out of my hand, and they, if they can't discard the lands, then... So anyways, I want to get some information, and I do. And the only card I can really get is Dismember. But it does tell me that my opponent is dead, as far as everything goes. They just have to be able to... they have to be able to try to somehow discard these cards out of my hand, and it's going to be very difficult. The rest of the cards in their hand were worthless. And again, I just draw lands I keep lands in my hand as I draw them. Now I'm starting to blind self-mill here, because what I'm looking for is to build up to 5 mana at some point and do a Whir of Invention for, what is it called? Either a Lantern, or if I can, or I want to self-mill a Lantern and recur it with Academy Ruins. I want to sack Shredder to get back Whir if I mill it to go get a Lantern. Or if I'm really lucky, I can get a Witchbane Orb. I mean, heck, even at this point, I could, self-mill an Engineered Explosives, set it to 1, and just and then lock them out with Engineered Explosives and Academy Ruins. Yep. So still keeping lands in my hand. So that's basically I shocked my opponent for free and tapped a black mana. And I put the Shredder on top so I can really start to self-mill as quickly as I can. And the opponent is drawing blanks. So I really probably should have played either Glimmervoid or Island here instead of the Spire. Because Spire doesn't, like, both of these will provide the mana I need. I don't need the Spire. Like, this is Glimmervoid's probably correct. But I do want to name Mutavault with this Pithing Needle, because that's their really only other win con for the most, or usually it's their only other win con. Wrench Mind does hurt, because that's one of the few cards that can make me discard land cards. And there's a Witchbane Orb. I self-milled into a Witchbane Orb, put it back on top. So I'm going to take some damage from the rack. but because I've been holding lands, I've got a good buffer of life. So now they cannot target me. I can just start holding any cards in my hand. And so that's exactly what I do. I'm just holding all sorts of cards in my hand. So there's the Engineered Explosives. I decided not to quite play it yet. So what I'm trying to do now is I'm going to self-mill to get a Lantern, so I know that I already know that they have nothing in hand that can kill me. So, and I still don't want to put anything in their graveyard. I'm pretty sure they don't have anything, but I don't want to provide that opportunity if they do have something. So minimizing the number of choices that they have if I can. So at this point, if I can get a Lantern, then I know for sure I can stop them from getting a card that'll help them. Sure enough, I self-mill into a Lantern, put it on top, and I control the cards from here on out. Turns out they were just about to draw Smallpox, which would have been good for them. I would have taken 2 damage, but I mean, it wouldn't have mattered. Still, it was just 2 damage, and I would have just kept the next card I drew. So 4 Rock Lock, and I'm pretty confident that I can just win the game on out from here. It's just a matter of going through it. Not quite. I guess the opponent has Delirium Skins, and I guess they were kind of hoping they'd be able to draw that to try to get me to discard my cards. Which, if they had been able to draw it, it would have killed me in one fell swoop. So, but with 5 rocks out right now, they have to have 11 good cards in a row, and I can mill at the end of their turn, and they just have to have 6 cards. Now they have to have 7 cards in a row, and it's just not going to happen. Yeah, and opponent concedes. So game 2, I side in ley lines, all 3 ley lines. I side out my Collective Brutalities because they don't really do much. I kept my Grafdigger's Cage in, I kept Engineered Explosives in, kept the Witchbane Orb in. I took out 2 Gold Color's Bells because Gold Color's Bells could mill them as well as me, and I don't want to risk putting a Raven's Crime into their graveyard if I happen to not open with a ley line. I did go through their deck in game 1, so I knew that they weren't playing either white or green to answer ley line. So at this point I know if I can just mulligan to a ley line, and then I can hold cards and probably just win out from there. So that's my strategy here in game 2, since I saw that they weren't splashing white or green. So yeah, opponent decides they want to draw. I mean, otherwise this looks like a great hand, but I cannot do it. I want to hit that ley line. So mulligan, don't see a ley line. Mull to 5, I hit the ley line, and it's still a good hand. And if I remember correctly, there was still a good card on top. It was a Glimmer Void, I think. Yeah. And the opponent just quits immediately. They're like, screw this. Because they know that they have no answer. Their entire... Yeah, every single card in their hand is shut off by a ley line except for the land and the swamps. And I mean, with these 2, I can next turn I could Stirrings for a Mill Rock, and it'll be super easy. I didn't even get to see what the top card of their library was, but yeah, a really easy win against 8 Rack. It's not that difficult. You just have to know how to play it, and you just hold lands in your hand. You're minimizing the number of choices that they have, since so few cards in their deck can actually make you discard lands.